We're very conscious we are the heirs of Mahatma Gandhi and legacy of ahimsa and non-violence.
The very first attack that they orchestrated was right after independence, 1947. They sent Pakistani armed military men, and they said it was Pakistani raiders who went. They said, we have nothing to do with it.
Well, you mentioned aircraft, and the question in a lot of people's minds is how many aircraft did India lose? We do know that there was some loss of aircraft, but not how many in this latest conflict.
We're not military folks, and our military are the only ones who really keep track of all of these things. But, I think the important message that came out was, whatever may or may not have happened in the course of a conflict, neither side, by the way, talks about losses very much. And that's partially because you know very well that operational details are very closely held with the senior military people. But I can tell you one thing, whatever may or may not have happened, look what happened on what turned out to be the last night of the conflict. When India not only effectively struck 11 airfields of the Pakistani military, but there are commercially available, publicly available satellite pictures showing the extensive damage done. There's been craters on the runway, there have been operational command centers that have been bust by these Indian bombs, and just yesterday, the Pakistanis publicly admitted that Indian strikes were so wide-ranging and effective, they struck from as far as Hyderabad in South Pakistan to Peshawar in the northwest. So it looks very clear that whatever damage the Pakistanis believe they may have inflicted on India, it wasn't sufficient to prevent India from inflicting such extensive damage on Pakistan that they decided to request us to stop, which we're very happy to do.
Okay, so India's maintained that the ceasefire occurred when the Pakistani DGMO called the Indian DGMO, requesting for a cessation of hostilities. Pakistan has been playing up the role of the US, and President Trump, even as recent as, I guess, a couple days ago, he keeps saying that he used trade to stop the war.
See, that's not the impression I have. I can tell you that it was a public record that there were calls coming from various foreign ministers to our foreign minister, to our national security advisor. The US was amongst the most active in this regard, and that Secretary Rubio spoke to his Indian counterpart, Jaishankar. He also, in his second hat of NSA, spoke to his counterpart, Mr. Doval. At one point, Mr. Vance, the vice president, called our prime minister. So there was a lot of calls being made, and that's true also the foreign ministers of the UAE, of Saudi Arabia, France, and so on. Many countries were concerned. My understanding is, and none of these calls was trade ever mentioned, not one. And certainly our information is that from our side, we gave a consistent response throughout, which corresponds to what I've just said to all of you, that we are only taking retribution for a terrorist attack. We are not interested in prolonging this conflict. If Pakistan hits us, we will hit back because we have a right of self-defense. If Pakistan stops, we'll stop. So we didn't need persuading to stop. And that message was given regularly to everybody else who called. I know that some of this is actually out on the sort of Twitter timeline of our foreign minister. So it was an open thing that we're talking to people and letting them know we're ready to call this off anytime the others do. And the others were the ones who were prolonging it. Only Pakistan had one foot on the escalatory ladder, not India. In every case, they initiated, we retaliated. When they stopped, we stopped. That's the way this came to an end.
All right. So critics argue that India hasn't presented enough concrete evidence to the international community regarding Pakistan's role in the Pahalgam attack. And as per the Indian government, the success of Operation Sindoor as well. How would you respond to that? Mr. Suri, would you like to take that question?
Poonam, I think this is not the first time that Pakistan has orchestrated an attack against India and claimed to not have any role in it. The very first attack that they orchestrated was right after independence, 1947. They sent Pakistani armed military men, and they said it was Pakistani raiders who went. They said, we have nothing to do with it. But then it was the Pakistani army. This was not the first time. One of our air bases, 2611 in the city of Mumbai.
Joint investigation
happened in Mumbai. Dossiers were presented, not just to Pakistan, but to the international community. Pakistan did nothing. This time around in Pahalgam, Within about 30-40 minutes after the attack, a front called the Resistance Front claimed credit for orchestrating this attack. And it was on their website for almost a whole full day until somebody in Pakistan, their handlers told them to take it down. And it was in the United Nations Security Council when the press statement was to be released. It was Pakistan, and it was at the support of China that it was removed, the reference to TRF. And the picture that has been going around on social media, where funerals of the terrorists attended by military-clad army men, is again a testimony to the deep nexus between Pakistani army, Pakistani ISI, Pakistani government and the terrorists. So this has gone on for a very long time. And I just want to, on the objective that we had set out to achieve. The first attack was with respect to the 9 terrorist bases. All the 9 terrorist bases that were attacked are on the UNSC 1267 list. It was not that India came up with a fictitious list. And the attacks on the 10th, 2 things prove India's capability. One, there are multiple satellite images available in public domain.
Right, and we've covered...
That has been accepted. And the fact that the Pakistani DGMO called the Indian DGMO, his counterpart, and requested for a ceasefire is further proof.
So in your visits to the countries that you visited so far, has the delegation presented more concrete evidence of Pakistan's complicity in the attack?
Look, evidence is a curious way of putting it, because in very many cases, in fact, in the bulk of the cases of the more than 40 to 50 terrorist attacks inflicted on India since the turn of the century, in every case, Pakistan has denied it, and in every case, their complicity has been established. Denial is standard fare for them. So you found Mumbai, 2008, where 170 people, including many American citizens, were killed in 5 locations in Mumbai. What happened? The Pakistanis said it wasn't them. Immediately, one of the killers was captured alive, and he turned out not only to be Pakistani, his family, his address, where he was trained, who trained him, everything was out there. You had the chilling recordings taken by Western intelligence agencies as well as Indian ones of the voice of the Pakistani handler giving minute-by-minute instructions to the killers in Mumbai to continue killing. This kind of evidence, plus the evidence from the interrogation Kasab, was also provided to the Pakistanis. Entire dossiers were put together.
Right.
Not one person has been prosecuted, not one person has been punished by the Pakistanis. The US, using the same evidence, has jailed David Coleman Headley for planning and plotting this attack, and Tahawoor Rana has been extradited to India, who is a Chicago-based conspirator in this particular thing. So we're showing you that despite the collection of evidence, there is actually no corrective action. So beyond the point, one piece of evidence, Poonam, is a long pattern of conduct. And don't ever forget that the Pakistanis also said they had no idea where Osama bin Laden was until he was found in a safe house right next to an army camp in a cantonment city. So Pakistan denials are not worth anything, frankly. Second is that the Resistance Front is a known proxy for the LET, the Lashkar-e-Toiba, headquartered in Pakistan. And the TRF evidence was given first, not just for this thing, but for their activities, was given first to the UN committee by India in December of 2023. So we've had repeated attempts, 4 attempts, to get the TRF listed. The fact that the TRF then claimed credit for this grotesque attack and did so in less than an hour after it took place, when most of the world didn't even know it had happened, shows their complicity. And third, frankly, our intelligence agencies don't unleash the Indian army or the Indian military without serious work. They have done their bit, and they have identified with names and photographs 4 of the 5 killers, 2 of whom are Pakistani, and 2 of whom were known to be locals who had gone to Pakistan for training 10 years ago and who clearly came back.
So
we are 100% sure we have the evidence we need. Those kinds of classified evidence that will not be shared the public, I'm sure.
No, not with the public, but
No.
with
With the intelligence agencies of friendly countries, I'm sure there's been some conversation.
what concrete outcomes have been agreed upon or do you expect will be agreed upon from this visit in terms of U.S. actions with regard to Pakistan?
Forgive me, may I look at that? I seem to have a slight audibility problem here with what concrete outcomes have been agreed upon, I see. We aren't really here to negotiate outcomes, that's the job of the government. Our job is to enhance understanding, to clarify our position and to explain if there are any questions or misapprehensions on the part of our interlocutors. We'd be very happy to address them. There wasn't a specific seek on our part beyond that. It's not that we've come here saying, would you do this for us? That's not what this is all about. And that's true, by the way, every country we've been to. We're just saying, this is our position, we want you to understand, and if you have any questions, we'll answer them, but that's it. We're not asking them to do anything other than to understand our point of view, to express their solidarity, and to stand with us if it happens again. I mean, we have no illusions. These buildings we've destroyed in the terror camps can be built again, 6 months, 9 months, who knows? The problem is, if they think they can keep doing this to us, they've got another thing coming, because we are not going to take it. If they hit us, we will hit them back. And we want the world to understand not only what just happened, but what could happen again if Pakistan does not control these elements on its soil.
So a lot of people that I talk to who don't know much about India and Pakistan, but they do know that both are nuclear armed. There's fear in a lot of people that, India and Pakistan tensions flare up regularly. They're both armed nuclear nations. So how seriously is the threat of nuclear engagement being taken, and what steps are being pursued to ensure such a scenario is avoided?
Okay, first of all, as I say, don't talk about tensions between India and Pakistan. Frankly, we have no tensions with Pakistan unless and until they start acting against us like this. We are very happy to leave them alone. And we have no grudge against them. Let them develop their own country or not develop their own country, or let the army ruin their country. That's entirely up to them. It's not our problem. So we are not creating any, there's nothing we're demanding out of Pakistan right now, except that they dismantle their terror infrastructure, right? So please don't, there's a big flaw in some of these assumptions that there is equivalence between India and Pakistan as if they're two sides of a chain. The fact is that there can be no equivalence between terrorists and their victims. There can be no equivalence between a country that's needling another country and sending terrorists across to bleed it with a death by 1,000 cuts, in the famous phrase of a Pakistani general, and those who are trying to defend their own territory, their own sovereignty, their own people. There is no equivalence. So as far as we're concerned, please don't think of it in those terms at all. But since you've asked, the bottom line is, we, in all our actions, have acted so responsibly that we are a long way shy of anything remotely approaching a nuclear threshold. When I say that our first strikes were only at terror bases, we did not even hit any Pakistani military installations until they started sending missiles and drones our way. That's when we responded. Till then, we didn't. So we are not doing, and look, you've seen the Russia-Ukraine war. One of the countries is a nuclear weapon. They've been fighting for 2.5 years. There's been far more devastation and destruction taking place, and yet there has been no resort to nuclear threats or nuclear weapons or whatever. I think that India-Pakistan is way, way, way short of that. We're talking in this case about an 88-hour conflict. We didn't even engage any ground troops. I don't think either country was able to penetrate the airspace of the other. It was drones, missiles, artillery shells, this sort of stuff. And it was a battle in some ways also between defense systems, in which I'm pleased to say we seem to have come out of it rather better, because there are no reports of any extensive damage in India, whereas lots and lots of downed drones and downed missiles have been found on the ground. None of them have done any major damage. So if you want to compare defense systems, that's maybe the more interesting comparison, not nuclear systems.
India is a victim of terror to the West. For most Westerners, it's a basic understanding that their government will stand against terrorism. So what's the missing link here? The fact that India had to send 7 delegations after the operation says a lot about how India has failed on building consensus on a topic like terrorism.
That's an interesting way of seeing it, because our experience in our meetings has not implied any lack of credibility or any non-receptivity to our message at all. So had your question been well grounded, we would have probably had some pushback or some skepticism or some negativism even, but we didn't. And we're talking about fairly wide range of countries. I mean, I realize that Guyana is not the United States, and that Panama or Colombia or Brazil all have independent characters. But in every country, we've encountered government officials, legislators, think tankers, and media, and of course, members of the general public. And I can't think of a single example, can you, where we had any skepticism or any difficulty selling the message. Some of the details we were giving them opened their eyes. But some of the, not one person said, we don't really believe this, or we think you're spinning a yarn or whatever. This is why Pakistan is now following in our wake to say we are also victims of terrorism. But if I can quote a former American Secretary of State who famously said, well, you can't breed vipers in your backyard and expect it to bite only your neighbors. That's what the Pakistanis did, sadly. And the result now is that they are being bitten too. I mean, we all know that, for example, the Taliban movement, and in fact, by and large, all these terror organizations were created by the Pakistani military and ISI and so on for specific target purposes. There were some units created to hit India. There were some that were created to take over Afghanistan. They wanted to do damage on both sides, on both of their borders. And ironically, one group has now broken up and started hitting Pakistan. The so-called Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is an offshoot of a terror movement initially incubated by Pakistan that's turned against its masters, just as Dr. Frankenstein discovered. You build a monster, you can't control it. That's what's happened to Pakistan.
And so, this morning, in fact, our meetings on the Hill, in private and in public, congressmen and senators were very clear in supporting our stand. And so as I said, the point of credibility, forget about the point of credibility, the point of you did the right thing, you have every right to defend yourself, as do we. So that's all we've encountered in these 5 countries.
The two consistent themes that have come out in all of our meetings, and yesterday I was talking to a couple of MPs who were part of the other delegations, including in Islamic countries. Two consistent themes. One, they're unequivocally in support of India and India's position against zero tolerance for terrorism and our counter-terrorism measures. Second, every single country that we spoke to is extremely enthusiastic about engaging with India in multiple other aspects. What can they engage with Pakistan? They want to do trade with India. They want to do technology with India. Countries like Guyana said, we are an extraordinary friend of India. Indian companies need to show more initiative to come here and help us out. Panama, I still remember, even while we were exiting the office of the president of Panama, he said, when will you be bringing the IIT to Panama? The same thing was with Brazil, from agro-technology to yoga, Ayurveda, harnessing India's digital stack. Every country is keen to do business with India, to talk trade with India, to talk future with India, because we bring a multi-dimensional value addition to the world. In 1996, India proposed the CCIT, the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism in the United Nations. We were the country that sponsored this idea. But unfortunately, even till today, there hasn't been a consensus around that to define in international terms what terrorism means and to come up with an international framework to go after those who sponsor it, fund it, and curb terrorism. I think that's a very important direction towards all countries coming together. While we were in Brazil, we learned that India and Brazil is working towards a bilateral agreement on combating terror, which is, I think, a very encouraging, important step for both of these countries. I have this 3-4 page list that mentions a list of major terrorist attacks affecting the United States and with connection with Pakistan. More than 32 incidents mentioned here. So the world needs to take note that the terror that is emanating from Pakistan is not just a threat to the immediate geography, but is a threat to the whole world.
Right. Well, I mean, you mentioned that all the visits that you've had, everybody supports India against terror, everybody wants to cooperate with India in different sectors. But do you see there being a growing consensus that Pakistan is a terrorist state something that President Bill Clinton contemplated announcing during Kargil?
Look, I mean, I think the Pakistan situation is such a mess that I would not want to venture a simple answer. I think that we have a peculiar situation where there is a nominally elected civilian government, but the reins are held by the military, where the most popular politician is in jail and has been for a couple of years and continues to attract mass adulation while still in jail. There are all sorts of things going on there, and the Pakistanis go around saying, we're helpless, we ourselves are victims of terrorism, because indeed you have the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan that's attacking the army and the civilian government installations and so on. So the country is frankly in a mess. To call it a terrorist state would be to imply that all of them are complicit. I think half the time one organ of Pakistan doesn't know what the other organ is doing. And there's a lot of this kind of confusion, which also makes it very difficult to talk to them. I will say that if the Pakistan government wants to be taken seriously as a responsible state, then the task for it is very clear. Dismantle the existing infrastructure of terror. Shut down every one of these terror training camps. Ban each of these organizations. Close their bank accounts. Arrest their leaders. There are 52 names in the list of the United Nations Terrorism Committee. Arrest all 52 of them. Put them in bars. Prosecute them seriously and not in the frivolous fashion we've seen after the Mumbai attacks. I mean, there are things that Pakistan can do in order to actually be respected for this kind of thing, but it won't do them. It's not doing them. And this is our biggest problem, Poonam. We would much rather not waste time on this issue, to be honest. We all have better things to do in India. But as long as Pakistan continues to incubate this kind of terror, these units, these terrorist groups that come and do this kind of colossal damage and cost lives in our country, then we'll have to respond exactly as we've done before, as we've done from the 7th to the 10th of May, and Pakistan should realize there will be a price to pay for terror. They cannot just walk across the border and kill our people and get away with impunity.